Amusement parks are supposed to be places full of fun and adventure for everyone, from thrill-seeking teens to families making memories. However, where excitement and crowds come together, danger sometimes lurks in the shadows. Amidst the laughter and flashing lights, some of the most disturbing deaths have unfolded on these rides. Here are 5 shocking amusement park tragedies that will leave you speechless. On August 7, 2016, Michelle and Scott Schwab of Kansas packed up their 4 boys for what was supposed to be a perfect family day. Schlitterbahn Water Park in Kansas City was hosting its Elected Officials Day, a tradition where lawmakers and their families got free entry. The kids were ecstatic, their excitement buzzing in the air. None more so than Caleb, the Schwab's 10-year-old son. He couldn't wait to dive into the water slides. But what should have been a day filled with laughter would turn into every parent's worst nightmare. A monstrous water slide towering at 168 feet and 7 inches. So tall it claimed the title of the world's tallest. It wasn't just a ride, it was danger dressed up as fun. Verrückt was the brainchild of Jeff Henry, the park's co-owner, a man with a bold vision but little formal training in engineering. Still, the slide opened to fanfare, and without any age restrictions, despite experts once recommending that only those 16 and older be allowed to ride. So when Caleb and his 12-year-old brother Nathan begged their parents to let them try it, there seemed no reason to say no. The 2 brothers climbed the endless 264 steps to the top. Nathan went first, rocketing down the massive structure while Caleb waited, practically vibrating with anticipation. Then came Caleb's turn. The raft he boarded was designed for 3, and Caleb, barely 73 pounds, sat up front, with 2 much heavier women seated behind him. No one realized it then, but the uneven weight distribution was setting the stage for catastrophe. The raft launched down Verrückt's first 17-story drop, hurtling faster and faster. As it hit the second hill, everything went wrong. The raft went airborne, violently. Caleb was thrown out of his seat, slamming into the metal support netting above. The impact was immediate, brutal, and final. Witnesses could only watch in helpless horror as Caleb's small body was torn apart in midair, leaving a sickening trail of blood along the ride. At the bottom, Nathan waited, smiling, until he looked up. He saw his brother's body fall from the sky. Nathan's scream shattered the air. Michelle, their mother, ran frantically toward the slide, desperate to reach her son, but was stopped by horrified witnesses who knew there was nothing left to see. Emergency crews rushed to help the 2 women who had been riding with Caleb, but for the Schwabs, the world had already stopped spinning. They left the park in a daze, numb, shattered, their family forever torn apart. In the weeks that followed, a chilling picture emerged. Verrückt had been built not with precision engineering, but with reckless trial and error. During testing, sandbags frequently flew off the rafts, a massive red flag that went ignored. Videos of these dangerous tests even went viral online before Verrückt opened to the public. Still, the park insisted the ride was safe. 13 people, it turned out, had already been injured before Caleb ever stepped onto that raft. It should have never happened. It was all preventable. In early 2017, the Schwab family reached a settlement of around $20 million. Verrückt was dismantled piece by piece. The park itself shuttered for good in September 2018, the screams of thrill-seekers forever silenced. Criminal charges were filed against Jeff Henry and others, including second-degree murder and involuntary manslaughter. But even those charges eventually crumbled in court. Allegations of illegally obtained evidence meant the people responsible walked away free. It was July 26, 2017. Tyler Gerald and his girlfriend, Keziah Lewis, had just come from her grandfather's funeral. The Ohio State Fair, with its flashing lights, swirling rides, and cheerful noise, seemed like the perfect place to escape the weight of the morning. They wandered through the crowds hand in hand, 2 young people chasing just a few hours of normalcy, never imagining how quickly everything could shatter. Tyler was just 18, fresh out of high school in Columbus, Ohio, filled with dreams and pride. He had recently enlisted in the Marines, his smile beaming in a Facebook photo where he wore his new uniform and carried a plaque. Life was just beginning. As the sun began to dip, they decided to cap the day with one last thrill, a ride on the Fireball. It looked like chaos spun into art, swinging riders 40 feet into the air while spinning them at dizzying speeds. Tyler and Kezia strapped in, not knowing that this would be the last ride they would ever share. At first, everything seemed fine. The Fireball roared to life, and the crowd below cheered as riders were hurled back and forth. But then, something went wrong. A violent shaking, sharper than it should have been, rattled through the ride. Passengers felt it. Some screamed not with excitement but with fear, and then it happened. In a heartbeat, a massive section of the ride tore apart. One entire row of seats was flung into the air like a toy. Tyler was thrown with such brutal force that there was no time for a goodbye, no chance to hold on. He hit the ground with a sickening finality, his life ending instantly. Kezia, still strapped into what was left of the wreckage, suffered horrifying injuries. Her pelvis shattered, ribs broken, ankles crushed. She drifted in and out of consciousness as chaos erupted around her. Screams filled the fairgrounds, but it was too late. Tyler, full of dreams and promises, was already gone. When Kezia woke up in the hospital, she was met not just with her own pain, but with the unbearable news that the boy she loved would never walk through her door again. The shockwaves tore through Columbus. Tyler wasn't just another face in the crowd. He was beloved, respected. A young man everyone believed would make something incredible of his life. Instead, his hometown mourned a future stolen in an instant. The investigation revealed a cruel twist. The Fireball had been inspected just hours before the tragedy. Signed off, declared safe. But lurking inside the ride were structural flaws invisible to the naked eye. Fatal cracks that had grown with every spin, every swing, until the inevitable happened. Inspectors missed it. No one caught it, and Tyler paid the price. In the wake of the disaster, grief hardened into resolve. Tyler's mother, Amber Duffield, alongside devastated supporters, fought for change. They pushed for tougher laws, demanding that no other family ever suffer the way theirs had. The result was Tyler's Law, a hard-won piece of legislation aimed at making amusement rides safer, inspections stricter, and accountability unavoidable. But no law could bring Tyler back. No law could erase the hole left in Kezia's life, a young woman who would never regain full mobility, who carried her physical and emotional scars through every day forward. The Ohio State Fair eventually reopened, the rides creaking back to life under tighter scrutiny. On the evening of July 19, 2013, Rosa Esparza and her family wandered through Six Flags Over Texas, soaking in the flashing lights and the electric buzz of summer excitement. It was getting late, but Rosa decided they should squeeze in one last adventure before heading home. No one knew then that this would be Rosa's final ride, forever. At 52 years old, Rosa had never been to Six Flags before. That day, she was joined by her daughter and son-in-law, strolling together through Arlington Park. When they reached the new Texas Giant, Rosa didn't hesitate. The roller coaster, a hybrid beast of steel and wood, had been revamped after the original had been plagued with safety complaints. Taller, faster, sleeker, it promised a wild rush of adrenaline. Rosa climbed into Car 3. The safety harness pulled down over her, but something didn't feel right. Passengers nearby would later recall Rosa's hesitation, her nervous glance at the restraint. She voiced her concern to a park employee, asking if it was really secure. The worker offered quick reassurance. If you heard it click, you're fine. That click was a comfort she desperately wanted to believe in. Yet some people said they hadn't heard anything at all. The ride lurched forward, up, and up again, pulling the cars into the darkening sky. Rosa's daughter could hear the screams from the riders, but something in those cries felt wrong. She turned to check on her mother, and what she saw froze her blood cold. Rosa was slipping. She was nearly upside down in her seat, her head low, her feet high, her body twisting in a way that should never happen on any ride. Passengers behind her reached out, stretching helpless hands toward her, but they couldn't reach. They could only watch, powerless, as the coaster climbed higher and higher. And then, on the third hill, the nightmare reached its climax. Rosa was hurled from the ride. Her family could do nothing but watch, paralyzed in their seats, as Rosa's body disappeared from view. Paramedics arrived within minutes, but there was no saving her. Rosa was pronounced dead at the scene. The impact had been so catastrophic that her body was partially severed, found tangled against a support beam above the honky-tonk tunnel, with blood and tissue scattered across nearly 75 feet of rooftop. It took firefighters an hour to recover what remained. In the days that followed, the truth began to seep out, and it was even more horrifying. Employees later admitted they had noticed Rosa's restraint wasn't as tight as it should have been. One had thought it sat unusually high. Another believed it hadn't fully locked over her thigh. Yet nothing was done. The park insisted there were no mechanical failures, pointing to their safety systems. But those systems had already malfunctioned earlier that very week, and everyone knew it. Even worse, another visitor came forward. Her daughter, she said, had ridden the new Texas Giant just days earlier, in the very same car, and had almost slipped from her seat. Her warnings had gone unheard, and now it was too late. The police ruled Rosa's death an accident. No criminal charges were filed, but for Rosa's family, no explanation could heal the raw, gaping wound left behind. They filed a lawsuit demanding accountability, demanding someone answer for the mother they lost in a few unspeakable seconds. The park reopened the new Texas Giant less than 2 months later, now fitted with redesigned restraints and seatbelts. Quietly, without fanfare, without apology. In November 2014, the family reached a settlement with Six Flags. It included a payment, but no admission of guilt, no words that could ever bring Rosa back. March 24th, 2022 was supposed to be a day filled with laughter. It was spring break, and 14-year-old Tyer Samson had made the trip to Orlando, Florida, to enjoy a few carefree days at Icon Park. But Ty wasn't just any teenager. At 6 feet 5 inches tall and 383 pounds, he was a giant among boys, earning the nickname everyone who loved him used with a smile, the Gentle Giant. With dreams of a future in football and a heart as big as his frame, Ty was the kind of young man who lit up a room with his easygoing charm and quiet strength. That afternoon had been filled with jokes, selfies, and the kind of joy that only comes when you're young and the world feels endless. Yet, under the surface, there were warning signs. Ty had already been turned away from 2 rides because of weight restrictions. A disappointment, sure, but one he took in stride. Then came the Orlando freefall. The ride towered above the park, a monster of steel and sky, 430 feet into the clouds, promising a 400-foot plunge at speeds reaching 75 miles per hour. New, dazzling, and dangerous. Ty approached it with caution. Something didn't sit right. Photos, taken just moments before the ride began, tell a story that words could never fully capture. Ty, sitting uneasily in his seat, the harness looking strained, looking wrong. He felt it too. He turned to a friend and said the words no child should ever have to say. "Tell my parents I love them." The ride launched upward, a slow climb into the heavens. For a few breathless moments, everything was still. And then, as the drop began, the nightmare unfolded. Ty slipped, clutching, grabbing, fighting against gravity itself, but it was no use. In a horrifying instant, he fell. When he hit the ground, silence fell over Icon Park. A silence that screamed louder than anything else. Emergency responders rushed in, but it was already too late. Ty was pronounced dead at the hospital. The autopsy revealed the cruel finality of it. Blunt force trauma, multiple devastating injuries, too severe to survive. In the days that followed, the horror only deepened. Investigators discovered that Ty's seat had been manually tampered with. The sensors, which should have prevented the ride from operating if the restraint wasn't properly secured, had been altered, tricking the system into thinking everything was fine when it wasn't. There was a gaping, deadly space between Ty and the harness, hidden by a lie in the machine's brain. And then there was the weight limit, 286 pounds. Ty, at 383 pounds, exceeded it by nearly 100, a critical limit that had never been enforced, never even explained to him. His parents, shattered beyond words, filed a wrongful death lawsuit, demanding answers, demanding change. They learned what no parent should ever have to face, that their son had been failed by every safeguard meant to protect him. On what would have been Ty's 15th birthday, friends, family, and strangers who had come to know his story gathered to honor him. They released balloons into the sky, each one carrying prayers, tears, and the memories of a boy who should still be here. State Representative Geraldine Thompson vowed that Ty's death would not be in vain. She pushed for the Tyer Samson law, legislation to ensure that amusement ride safety could never again be treated so carelessly. A settlement was reached in 2023 between Ty's mother and Icon Park, but the fight is not over. The case against the manufacturer of the ride presses on, with a jury trial set for January 2025, a courtroom where Ty's voice, stolen so young, will finally be heard. June 28, 2008, Asia LeSean Ferguson IV, 17 years old, was supposed to be making memories that day. He was there with friends from Okie Springs Baptist Church, his parents not far behind. Everyone soaking in the thrill and laughter that filled the air at Six Flags Over Georgia. Asia was the kind of young man people gravitated toward. A constant smile on his face, a hand always ready to help, a dreamer on the basketball court and a scholar in the classroom. His life, so full of hope and momentum, felt unstoppable. The day unfolded in a blur of roller coasters, games, and the kind of happiness that feels endless. Among all the rides that Six Flags offered, one called to them louder than the others: Batman the Ride. A monster of steel and speed, famous for its roaring loops and heart-stopping twists. It was the kind of ride that dared you to conquer it. But somewhere in that rush of excitement, something went wrong. Asia and one of his friends found themselves separated from the rest of the group, wandering into a restricted area, a place hidden from public view, fenced off with warnings and signs that screamed danger. No one knows exactly why Asia decided to cross those 2 6-foot barriers. Some say he was trying to retrieve a lost hat. Others think he was searching for a shortcut back to the parking lot. Maybe it was just a split-second decision, the kind teenagers make all the time, never expecting consequences so heavy, so final. Whatever the reason, in those few moments, Asia stepped into the shadow of death. Beneath the tangled web of Batman's track, the air roared with the sound of speeding steel. At nearly 50 miles per hour, the coaster raced by, a blur of yellow and black fury. Asia was in its path. There was no warning, no time to scream, no chance to escape. In an instant, he was struck. The impact was devastating, merciless. Witnesses stood frozen, their screams catching in their throats, unable to believe what they had just seen. A young man who had laughed and smiled moments earlier, now gone in the blink of an eye. A Marietta police officer, off-duty but nearby, immediately called for help. Park security and rescue teams raced to the scene, but it was already far too late. Asia Ferguson was pronounced dead where he lay, the violent finality of it too much for many to even process. As investigators combed through the wreckage of that terrible moment, they found the warnings, the clear signage, the barriers meant to protect. They found no mechanical failure, no negligence on the part of the ride itself, only a terrible, tragic mistake, one that cost a brilliant young life. The coroner confirmed what everyone already feared. Asia had died from blunt force trauma. His death was ruled an accident, but to those who loved him, there was nothing accidental about the gaping hole he left behind. His father, shattered and searching for meaning, spoke about his son's vibrant spirit, how Asia could brighten a room with his laughter, how he dreamed of college, of basketball glory, of a future he would never get to live. Friends wept, remembering the boy who was always there to lift them up, who played with heart on the court and studied with determination in the classroom. A boy full of kindness, ambition, and the rare kind of light that doesn't come along often. Six Flags shut down Batman. The ride in the days that followed, a gesture of respect that felt hollow against the enormity of the loss. Investigators ordered inspections, demanded changes, insisted that the barriers be made higher, the warnings louder, as if more signs could mend a broken heart or bring back the boy who had hopped a fence thinking he was invincible.